Phumlani Josie, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. It's great to be back this week. I have a very fascinating guest, Gareth Stokes. He and I have been in communication for some time now. He does great work in the world of financial services. He is a head of content and communication strategy at Stokes Media. He's a specialist financial writer as well. So he understands the financial services industry well. And this week, I want us to discuss that. Should we think about our financial services in South Africa? Where it is, how are things going, and how can we make it better? As it contributes about 20% of our GDP, so it's a very important industry in the country. Gareth, wonderful to see you, sir. How are you doing? All good?
Thanks, very well, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah, 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 yeah. Is there anything you want to add to my intro of your great self?
no, I think I'm very happy, except to say perhaps that I do focus on the insurance and investment industries. And you've asked
Ah,
me this week to dive a little bit into the banking sector. So it's new territory for me, although
mm.
I have been writing since way back in 2007. So I do have a solid foundation and a good overview of the sectors.
Oh, of the sectors. Now, tell me about the insurance industry that you are in, right? How is it doing at this point? Is it, could things be better? How is it doing in the economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think things could always be better, but overarchingly, the insurance sector in South Africa is quite well established and I would say doing fairly well. Certainly, it's penetrated the most on the continent of Africa in terms of the life insurance take-up. The general insurance or non-life insurance sector is a bit of a different story.
Yeah,
There are obviously a lot of issues, but the regulator has been getting quite tough on those issues, especially where it comes to the fair treatment of consumers, where there's been a lot of focus on protecting, especially the funeral insurance clients.
yeah,
So they're aiming at the low income informal sector person, and they want to try and create better protections to ensure that the use of funeral insurance is correct and to ensure that the consumer there is not exploited. Um,
yeah,
the
yeah,
formal sector, Phumlani, is I
yeah,
just think the constraint there is GDP growth, and the constraint there is the number of employed people. Because we also have great innovative insurers in that space
yeah.
offering excellent death, dread disease, and disability products.
Mm.
But the limiting constraint for them is just finding enough people with the necessary income bands to actually service, if you know what I mean.
To actually service. And in terms of how is the penetration rate? I mean, we have different regions in the country, right? You've got poorer regions, you have richer places. Um, are we looking at an industry where you would say that it's basically the way it is providing the service? It's fairly balanced given the circumstances, right? In the sense that if you come from poorer, places, you do have an opportunity to at least to take a chance in trying to get insurance. How do you see those imbalances? Are they taking any? Are we seeing them at all?
Well, I mean, I think the story that encouraged you to reach out to me is a
Yeah.
perfect example of what's happening in the South African financial services space,
Mm.
where the big brands are really keen to tick the checkbox of financial inclusion. They want to make sure that everyone in South Africa, whether they're in the formal or the informal sector, can reach out and get, the banking account. And on the back of that bank account, they can take up the smaller premium insurances, like, for example, credit life insurance when they purchase an item, and funeral insurance to help the family in the event there's a death. So we were talking there about the story of ShopRite, which has
Yeah.
since
Mm.
2020 actually been offering what they call their money market account, which they bill themselves as the cheapest transactional bank account available to South Africans. And I've done a bit of digging there. They do that in an alliance with African Bank. So they're actually using African Bank's license and compliance at this stage. And I'm not sure if they have plans to get their own banking license, but whether they do or not, they're already in a position where they can serve millions of customers.
Mm, mm, mm. Because their CEO, he seems very. This story we are referring to was published on Business Day. where they are talking about Shoprite's banking ambitions, right? And the CEO says,
Yes.
look, we want to disrupt the banking sector. We have millions of our clients, and we want to somehow get into banking through them. But are they entering? Is Because I've always felt, Gareth, that our industry is the banking industry. Let's speak about the banking industry now, right? I don't see competition at all. I mean, we have a few five big banks, they call them big five. Then we have
Yeah.
smaller ones after that. But it's not a competitive space at all. I mean, would it be a good idea to see guys like Shoprite coming through and trying to make the market more competitive, or banking sector?
So I did a bit of thinking about the banking sector per se. And I
Yeah,
mean, as of latest stats from the Prudential Authority, I think there are 16 registered banks in South Africa. They're not all trading, but obviously we have this, I would say it's almost a three-tier segment. So you
yeah,
have the traditional big retail banks, right? They used to be called the Big Four, and all of those brands have records in some form of another going back to the late 1800s. You're talking Standard Bank, you're talking First National, you're talking Nedbank, and you're talking ABSA, right?
yeah,
They were then at some point joined by Investec, and those five banks together were referred to as the Big Five. But Investec obviously services more an institutional client and a high net worth client. So what I think happened is in 2001, we had Capitec entering the fray. And if you had to look at the environment today, you would definitely lump them in, Capitec, alongside the Big Four traditional banks as the majority of the banking sector in South Africa. And I think the Big Five banking licenses actually account for 90% of the banking assets in the country. That's according to the Prudential Authority.
mm,
The remaining 10% is split up between what they call local branches of offshore banks and then
yeah,
all those small players, the other 11 registered banks that are trading locally.
mm, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
in terms of your question on competition, I think competition is fierce for that low fee account, and that explains how Capitec has managed to grow from zero in 2001 to, I think at latest count they have over 24 million bank accounts registered on their platform. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done well, Capitec. I mean, they've been it's one of those companies where people say, look, it's one of those companies that were founded in our democratic era, and it has done well. Um, so in the case of how do you see the regulatory environment within the banking sector? Because there have been many concerns from some people who say that, I was at another dinner not long time ago, a few weeks back, and the gentleman says to me, this is a gentleman who was quite older than me, and he says that, before, and when he says before, he he was referring to something like maybe 30 years ago, before 30 years ago, it was easy for people to be loaned money, right? There were less regulations. And there has been a negative impact on that, at least in his view. But of course, we do need some regulations. We can't be an environment without any regulations. But he was saying that we have seen more regulations when it comes to, especially the banking sector, right, and the financial services industry, in fact, as a whole. How do you see regulations
Yes.
in South Africa?
Well, I mean, we have been through a bit of a regulatory evolution. So we've come into
Yeah,
something called the Twin Peaks regulatory framework, and it's been introduced and ongoing since probably about 2014. 2017, we had the Financial Sector Regulation Act. And what that act delivered is two peaks of regulation. So we have a Financial Sector Conduct Authority that
yeah,
is concerned with behavior of all the financial institutions, whether you're a bank or an insurer or a financial advisor. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority will make sure that you stay in line and that you comply with the regulation. And then on the prudential side, under the Reserve Bank, we have the Prudential Authority, and they're tasked with ensuring really the capital reserves of the banks and insurers are up to scratch, and
yeah.
they deal with all that kind of thing. So we've got a very strong regulatory framework, and I think it's recognized as a strong framework anywhere in the world. We can stand up anywhere in the world. As to whether or not it becomes too complex at the lower level, I mean, I think there are a lot of complaints about the cost of compliance. So you might hold up the argument that it costs me so much to comply that I'm
Yeah.
struggling to issue an account to the low income market, for example. But
Yeah.
I think the benefits of the protections, I think, still outweigh the cost.
The costs. Yeah.
And and what we're seeing is that guys that can come in with scale are quite easily able to carry that cost
Mm.
and still offer a cost-effective service, as it were.
Yeah. But so I mean, I've said this in my previous commentaries, and that is when I look at our financial services sector, it seems to be the strongest in sub-Saharan Africa, right? I was looking at the data when I was preparing to talk to you. At least 90% of our adults, they are banked in South Africa. Contrast that to countries like Congo, DR, where it's less than 20%, Gareth, right, of adult banked. Because there is no trust, there are no functioning institutions in countries like Congo, right? And then we have other countries, Zambia, Malawi, and so on at lower rates. But South Africa's financial services industry, it really is the infrastructure, the trust, it's there, right? And I mean, it's not only banking, insurance, and so on. We have a stronger financial services sector that is trusted even by the citizens. Um, can we, do you think that our current leaders, overall, at a broad perspective, do you think are they getting it right? Because I would argue that they have though of course there can be concerning regulations than them, but I think it's one of those things that I think the ANC government has sort of managed right in contrast to other, things.
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at it in the context of national treasury being the main driver of most of the things that we see unfolding in terms of financial sector regulation. And I
Yeah,
think, yes, the regulatory framework is extremely important. But the other important thing is that you have to enable free business. And for the most part, South Africa does have a relatively free business sector. And
yeah,
that's allowed the likes of a ShopRite, for example, or an MTN to decide if they want to provide banking services, they can go ahead and do it. And I think the big difference, you were mentioning penetration or sorry, financial inclusion in the rest of Africa. The
yeah,
reason that South Africa is doing so much better in terms of the actual financial inclusion, in terms of bank accounts, is the distribution networks that we have. So you
yeah,
can now, for example, look at a ShopRite Checkers and why they're saying, or why they're so upbeat about banking is they've got 3,500 stores across 8 countries, right?
mm,
That's their latest reports.
yeah,
They talk about South Africa. They have 1.2 billion customers entering their stores across their various brands each
yeah,
year.
yeah,
And those customers, any one of them can go to a ShopRite or a USave or a Boxer store, provided there's a money market counter there, and they can open that bank account. And this, we'll just use it as an example, this ShopRite
mm,
money market account is a transactional account. They can use that account to buy selfie, any transaction you can do on a USSD cell phone, you can do on
yeah,
that account.
And I
That's
guess
the
just,
distribution. If you don't have a distribution, I mean, now suddenly every till point can act as a withdrawal or a deposit counter.
yeah.
You've got 20,000 tills across the country. They've literally rendered the traditional bank branch with a bank manager obsolete.
Yes, obsolete. Yeah, that's very interesting. And as you just mentioned, treasury, because I've always felt as well, this is just my view that even though I may be dissatisfied with some of the policies in the country, policies at a macro level, public policy, right? But I've always felt that the guys at the treasury, right, and the guys at the Reserve Bank, and I want to get your thoughts here. They've always been kind of sensible, right? When it comes to policy on what needs to be done, Kganyago, the chair of the Reserve Bank, has been pushing hard against the idea that, well, the mandate of the bank should be expanded, it should include job creation. All these sort of left-wing people who have been pushing for that agenda. And he has fought hard and pushed back and has been saying, look, I don't have the tools to be, to address the jobs issue. But I felt that these guys, the Reserve Bank and the Treasury, they've been sensible people over the past, over the years when it comes to policy and tackling issues. The Reserve Bank has been very careful on how it is managing its monetary policy and on its independence as well.
Yeah, I mean, you make excellent points there, Phumlani, and both of those institutions, National Treasury, SARB, for that matter, the FSCA, for that matter, the PA, these guys tasked with steering South Africa through a financial services policy framework. They're all doing an excellent job, and if you had to rate them, I mean, you've got to give them a top mark. National Treasury has been solid for years. Look, I mean, obviously the occasional blow-ups here and there, and the Reserve Bank as well. And the fact that the South African Reserve Bank has been able to protect its independence and its ability to focus on inflation targeting, monetary policy matters without too much intervention from government has been a saving grace for us. And let's not say they've had an easy road of it, because there are factions in the ANC that have been coming after the Reserve Bank for years. I think now possibly those factions they've splintered off into the EFF and MK. But even this year, we're hearing calls for a review of the Reserve Bank.
Yeah, we are hearing that. Yeah, I read somewhere that the ANC will meet soon and to discuss expanding
so
the
perhaps
mandate.
the guys are looking around and saying, yeah, there's still two institutions that we can blow down to the ground. We haven't finished our work yet.
Yeah. And they say,
fortunately, this is not a
and then Gareth, they are saying that, well, we want the Reserve Bank to create jobs. I'm saying, so you failed to create jobs through structural reforms, through good education, infrastructure, upskilling people, doing away with things that suppress investment, right? Things that discourage investment. They failed on the basics, right? The crime is out of control, right? It's costing our country 10% of GDP. Right. So they are failing to get the basics right. They are failing to get the regulations right, at least at a macro level. And now they are coming to say, well, maybe the Reserve Bank is going to solve it for us. How about they help us to create jobs?
Look, as little as it is government's responsibility to put brooms in hands and call it a job, it's not the Reserve Bank's responsibility to do that either. Government and the Reserve Bank and any other institution, public sector institution, is tasked with creating an enabling environment for business, and it should be business that creates jobs. I think in South Africa, we've slipped into a position, and now we're way outside of our topic, but I think we've slipped into a position where I think the state sector is creating almost as many jobs as the private sector, but we certainly have 2 million odd people on the public sector wage bill, and a country of South Africa's size cannot afford that level of state employee.
No, they can't. They can't. But let's get back to now, as we again return now to banking. How in your view, if you had a plan or a model, right, how would you encourage sort of more banking entrepreneurs or financial services entrepreneurs in the country? How can we build? But look, I ask you this because I'm a strong believer in a very productive economy, right? An economy that produces, whether it's in terms of services or goods, as much as possible, but producing, the goods and services that the world wants to buy, right? You don't want to produce something that is not in demand, right? So that means you need to get what you produce right. It has to be something that the world needs, that people are willing to buy. But how do we create these entrepreneurs in the public services, in the financial services sector? Because there are many talented people out there. And what are the mechanisms we could use to expand them, the sector and to create more skilled, more, banking financial services entrepreneurs?
Look, I'm sure there are a lot of people way more qualified than me to tackle this question, but I think one of the important things is that there are now platforms available that allow a startup and I'll caveat that as a startup with funding
Yeah.
to enter, the insurance and banking space, you can literally build a bank if you wanted with an alliance partnership with another company and using a software as a service solution, that you can buy off the cloud, as it were.
Yeah.
But I don't think every entrepreneur should be going out there and saying, I'm going to start another bank. I think what these guys need to look at is they need to identify the pain points in the market and see how they can use technology to create a service that can then link in to the network offered by a bank and or insurer. I mean, it's probably you really caught me with a bit of a loaded question there because it's not an
Yes.
easy
Yeah.
solve.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
loaded question. Yeah. It's not an easy one, but I get your point that we already have a very well established, banking sector. So maybe people need to be, innovative enough to, how do they come up with something that can, that can tap into that, something small, different, not, well, small in the, how can I put it? Well, something big in terms of as an idea, but focused and say that there's a pain point, as you put it, and then you want
yeah.
to improve that in the very big banking sector.
I wish I'd done a bit more research because everything that I researched now before our conversation sort of ended up in a big business. When we're
Yeah,
talking about innovation here, we were
yeah,
talking about African Bank Alliance partners, and you end up with MTN and ShopRite and
yeah,
Les Saka, I think it is, Services Technologies.
yeah,
Um, I'm not so sure. Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be a job creation solver. I think any startups in these kind of spaces are going to be small niche firms, probably with
yeah. Small
two or
niche.
three
Yeah.
tech
Mm.
buffs, a key accounts manager, and somebody who's really good at selling. But literally, you do have to look at pain points, and to my view, you'll be difficult to solve some of the pain points as well as, for example, a ShopRite, because they are so close to their customer and they've got so much data about how their customers interact with retail and financial services that
Yeah.
anyone trying to get into that space is already on a back foot.
Yeah, and
Um,
they have a very strong brand as well. I mean, it's something that for them they can utilize or exploit their brand trust. They trust their
yeah.
brand. Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the new entrants, I mean, when I say new, I think Discovery Bank launched in 2019. And we've got Old Mutual Bank. They're also launching a bank right as we speak. I think 2024, they trialed it and they're launching it between 2025 and 2026. But
Mm,
both those businesses are massive, diversified financial services businesses.
mm.
And they
Yeah.
obviously have enough capital and enough resource to spin out a bank,
Yeah.
while the
Yeah.
rest of them keeps on producing revenue and income and keeping the shareholders happy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know exactly, but I think it took a good couple of years for Discovery Bank to reach the break-even point, and they today boast, I think, 2 million customers.
Yeah.
Time Bank is an interesting one. I think they've got a few more customers, but they also have some kind of a tie-up with Sanlam, I believe, and they've also got massive capital support from African Rainbow Capital, I think it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've
I
got the
stand
guy, Patrice Motsepe is the backer,
yes,
the
yes.
billionaire guy.
So I
Yeah.
think Time Bank has already reached about 8 million, and I'm not 100% sure of that number. But the what amazes me really is how quickly these startup banks have managed to sign on customers.
Wow.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
when I did my research here, I had a whole bunch of concerns, and one
Yeah.
of my concerns was that a lot of people are trying to save money by moving from one of the big four banks and opening up a Capitec or a Bank Zero or a Time Bank, and then forgetting to close their main bank account. In other words, I think there's quite a lot of double counting where a
Oh,
person
wow.
may be a
Yeah.
client of FNB and of Bank Zero or Standard Bank and of Time Bank, et cetera, et cetera. And we just need to be careful of that because as bad as it is to hold 5 or 6 funeral policies in one family, you shouldn't be holding 5 or 6 bank accounts. You're just costing yourself more money and stripping that money out of your own hands.
Yeah. Yeah. You're costing yourself money. How do you see AI? How do you see artificial intelligence as it is it's shaping every industry now, Gareth? We cannot run away from that. We were at a conference the other day, and they wanted me to speak about the impact of AI in the accounting world, what it would mean, and in economies in Africa. And I've been reflecting a lot about AI. But most of what I've written or said, it's been largely about concerns and the challenges of um, of what the AI could bring. But some of the things I don't have concrete solutions as to how they really are going to be solved. But how do you see AI shaping the financial services industry?
Look, I mean, it is already revolutionizing how things happen. But I've had a little rant on LinkedIn the other day. One of
Mm,
my concerns firstly is AI is a little bit like a computer. So if you unleash AI on a flawed human process, it's not going to fix that flawed process. It needs to be trained on the correct process. So to just throw AI at a customer services function, for example, which is not giving optimal outcomes, you're just going to have a robot giving suboptimal outcomes to your customer. That's one thought. I definitely think AI is going to contribute to a bloodbath, jobs bloodbath.
in
We
financial
should
services.
well in certain areas of financial services. But maybe let
Yeah,
me give you an example. A
yeah,
while back, I attended a presentation by a company called Everything.insure,
yeah,
and they basically what they do is they train what they call an AI agent in a specific function in insurance. So you'll, for example, have an AI customer services agent.
yeah.
And they said that when they release a new insurance product, once they have fed the documentation of that product into an AI, the AI agent, the time it
Mm,
takes that AI agent to become as proficient as a human customer services agent is 30 seconds, right? So they drop all the information into the computer. That AI agent then becomes familiar with all that information, and it takes 30 seconds to train it on that
yeah.
product,
Mm,
right? They have AI agents for every function that an insurer might do. So they can have an AI agent that's trained up to do underwriting, for example. And that
yeah,
AI agent can, in a real-time interaction, determine whether or not it can underwrite a risk, whether or not it can set a price, or whether it needs to refer that call on to a human helper, as it were. So it's fascinating what can be done. I don't know if it will be as taken up as rapidly in South Africa as, say, in some of the Western markets. For example, I think I saw the other day the guys at Google were protesting because they're literally not employing junior developers anymore and just letting the AI crack out code and the senior developers polish it up. So it is going to create some interesting dynamics going forward. Customer services is one of the areas that they say could be under pressure. And if you think about it, financial services is little more than distribution, which is a combination of customer services and sales.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
I think it'll be interesting. But on the other side, you it doesn't really seem that I've seen yet that it's at the level where you would go and say, okay, I've got 15 people on my sales desk. I'm going to replace them with one AI agent. I think we're a long way away from that.
yeah. Long way away from that. Now, then there's this thing, right? This is a personal, this is sort of a personal thing. I'm saying it because I saw somebody posted it on X the other day who was saying that he was so frustrated that when he calls one of South Africa's banks, they make him talk to this bot, right? Something automated. And he hated that. And I'm one of those
Yeah.
people as well. I don't know. I mean, I hate this thing of being. I think when you call, there should be an option right on the code. When I speak to a human person, or should we continue, should you continue listening to this automated voice? Um, for me, I still prefer to talk to the human person, right? Especially when I do things telephonically, when I deal with the banking matters, and I guess I don't know if are you observing that amongst some people, even maybe yourself as well?
Absolutely. I don't think anyone wants to talk to a robot.
Yeah,
I haven't found somebody yet because first, the robot doesn't pick up any of your innuendo. It doesn't pick up your emotion. It doesn't really care about your problems or your concerns. And with respect to what I said earlier, what's happened is the inefficiencies that were in the old call centers have just been reproduced now, but without having to employ someone. And that's what concerns me more than the fact that you're talking to a robot or a human. I think if the robot could actually solve your problems, you would be celebrating it. But it can't save your problems. And almost always what happens is you spend 10 minutes going back and forth through menus that this robot has been trained on, and then you get escalated to a human person anyway. So what the hell is the point? Take the robot out, let me phone a human, sort my problem out in 3 minutes instead of 27. You know,
Mm.
I got very frustrated with it. And I mean, it's just like processes that aren't very clever. In the old days, I don't know if you remember, they always used to say, please enter your ID number, please enter your bank account number. And then you
Yeah.
got through to a human that said, please, can you give us your ID number? And you go, no, the system and processes are broken. They were broken before, and they're still pretty broken now, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah. So grey listing, where are we? And how has that been? I read
Oh,
somewhere that by later this year, we'll be out of the grey list.
yeah.
How have you seen it? What has been the impact?
Well, I mean, I think we talked about it a lot. The fact that we were on the FATF grey list alongside some pretty dubious countries
Yeah.
got the enforcement agencies particularly to really take notice. I mean, that was really, there's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes at National Treasury, at the FSCA, at
Yeah.
all of these enforcement agencies to try, and I think there were, I forget how many, it was a 21 odd things that were initially a concern. And I think at the latest assessment, there were two that were still outstanding. But yeah, I've also heard what you've heard, which is that pretty much we should be coming off at the end of the year.
Mm.
What I have heard is that coming off the list doesn't really change anything. So all of the improvements that we've made, we need to continue doing those things, right? So being on
Yeah.
the list got us to get all of our processes and our enforcement capabilities up to speed, and now we're expected to maintain them there. So the checks that, for example, a financial advice practice had to do um, because of the FATF grey listing remain in place. You can't now suddenly relax again. So you've got to
Yeah, you
take care of
can't.
things like customer. You've got to take things of ultimate beneficial ownership so that you always know whose money you're investing and all that kind of thing. That stays in place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now we have 6 minutes left, Gareth. Tell me about fintech. How do you see fintech? I mean, it's been something, as I've been reading in recent years, that has been really on the rise. And I've always thought that there are many opportunities that if you have the best idea, and it seems like there's a lot of funding, like private sector funding or investment that has gone into the fintech industry. But how do you see this industry doing, and where is it headed, the fintech world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we came off the curve a little bit. It was all the rage 3 or 4 years ago in the
Yeah.
States, and I don't. I mean, I haven't gone and looked into the fundings, but I think there's an element of fintech in almost everything that's happening in banking and insurance at this point.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a new startup, like a Naked Insurer or a Pineapple, they build fintech in there, and I'm sure that they've got third-party suppliers that help them with fintech. But I mean, I think overall what we're seeing is the digitalization of all financial services. And
Yes.
the
Yeah.
reason that they digitalization, the reason that they're digitalizing is so that they can give their customers the service and the experience that they want. So, today's customers, they want everything available online 24/7, and they want to be able to transact with a minimum of fuss. And I think that's where fintech comes in. There's small firms
Yeah.
that offers some other service that will help the larger firms improve theirs. I think that's mainly where they operate at this stage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And would I be right to say that you sound optimistic about our financial services sector? Because for me, it's one of those things that I'm still sort of proud about it when I speak about my country, right? There are other things as well. We do have many challenges. My audience, they know this, the challenges I always talk about. But the financial services sector is one of those things that where I still hold a positive view and I'm optimistic about the future. Are you, or are you pessimistic, or you sound optimistic?
Well, I mean, I think we've got an excellent selection of banks, insurers, and when I say insurers, I mean both in the life and the short-term space,
Yeah,
and uh, and telecos for that matter. The only missing element is the GDP growth and the jobs growth that will keep these guys writing good profits. But they're so exceptional that when they want to, they can just walk across borders and start businesses there. And that's, I think, what we need to see more of. Have more of our South African brands tackling the foreign markets,
the
but
foreign
obviously trying
markets.
to
Yeah,
yeah
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
to do the MTN Iran transaction preferably.
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with you because I think that if if we can get public policy right to grow the economy, to have people who are working, because the key is work. People have to work, right? Productive citizens who work, and then these our financial services sector will get more customers, right? Which will mean more
Yeah,
growth. The key is getting a macro environment where the economy is growing, right? And right now it's not looking good. Um,
yeah.
so no, I agree with you on that. Gareth, wonderful to talk to you, sir. We are out of time. Great conversation. I really learned a lot. Gareth Stokes is the head of content and communication strategy at Stokes Media. He's also a specialist financial writer. Where do people find you, Gareth, if they want to follow up on your work?
Or they can find me on LinkedIn, or they can find most of my articles on FA News, or they can just find my website, stokesmedia.co.za.
Stokesmedia.co.za.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome stuff. It's Phumlani Majozi. It's the Phumlani Majozi Show. Remember to subscribe to this show at Majozi Show on YouTube. Do follow me on X at Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm on LinkedIn, Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm also on Facebook, Phumlani M. Majozi. That's my Facebook page. I'm on TikTok as well, as Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm on Instagram at Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm everywhere, Gareth. I'm pushing the message.
That sounds like it. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful, sir. You enjoyed this conversation? Well, if you did, do subscribe to this show, the Phumlani Majozi Show on Public Policy. Remember to also follow me on X at Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm also on LinkedIn, Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm on Instagram as well, at Phumlani M. Majozi. I'm also on Facebook, Phumlani M. Majozi. That's my Facebook page. I'm also on TikTok at Phumlani M. Majozi. If you have any recommendations or thoughts about this show, do email me, majozimedia@gmail.com. Yes, majozimedia@gmail.com.